In this video I'm going to show you how to write HTML and CSS to lay out your pages. So we're just going to imagine a scenario, okay? Let's imagine that I want to create a website that looks similar to this. So imagine this is my browser window and I want to create a layout that's got maybe some sort of logo here. Yep. And I've got some sort of menu here. And maybe I've got some sort of introduction here. We'll call this an intro. And then I might have a picture here. Pick. And then I might have some text here. Right, the first thing to recognize is that when I'm designing this, I'm designing it in boxes. Okay, so the best way to visualize your website is in boxes. And if I just show you that that's what a lot of websites do. If I go to the BBC's website, I'll just shrink this so you can see it in my screen. If I go to the BBC's website, you see it looking like this. But I've got a little tool on my browser that allows me to see what it will look like when they designed it. If I click this verify button here, and you just have to wait a few seconds, this is actually what it would have looked like when the BBC people designed it. And notice everything is in boxes. Yep, so that's what you've got to imagine as well. Imagine that absolutely everything you're doing is in boxes. So when I drew this, I drew things in boxes. Even if I want this logo to be a circle or something like that, just imagine that it's actually in a box. So what we need to do is you've got to visualize that. That's what I want it to look like in terms of boxes. And now I need to go and code that. So I've started off with a couple of things already made before I started the video. So this index.html file is this index.html file. This CSS file is this CSS file. And you can see that I've linked them together because I've written here link rel type href css style.css. So you should all understand that. That's saying I am index.html, go to the CSS folder and get me this style document. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by, in this CSS document, I'm going to create something called a class, and the class starts with a dot. Don't worry too much yet if you don't know what a class is. If you've not used one before, it'll become explanatory in just a minute. So I'm going to call this class, and I'm going to call it logo. Now notice how that links in nicely with my label design. I'm about to create a style that will hold my logo. Alright, so I'm going to call this class logo. Call them something relevant. If I just have a look at my logo, it's got certain properties. There's not much going on at the minute, but it's obviously got a width and it's obviously got a height. Alright, so in fact I'm even going to style it with a little bit of colour. So I'm going to say, right, my logo is going to be the colour red. So at the minute I know three things about my logo. I know its width, I know its height, and I know it's going to be red. So I can style those things in my CSS. I could say the width, and I could say, let's just have a rough estimate of what that is. Okay, so I'm going to say that's roughly about 300 pixels, alright? I'm not going to worry too much at the minute about that, but say it's 300 pixels. I'm going to say it's got a height of, let's say, 75 pixels. 75 pixels. And then I'm going to give it a background color. Notice I use background color, not color. If I use the word color, that would style the color of the text that's inside it. So background color, I'm going to give it red. So that's FF0000. Right, so I've now just built that box there. And I've called the style for that box logo. So if I go into my index.html, now what I want you to imagine is this. I'm going to use an element called a div. All you really need to think about is that every time I use the word div, I'm referring to one of these boxes. So I'm saying, I want one of these boxes. I want a div, right? Now, what do you want? You're going to style me. I am a box. I want you to style me. So I'm going to refer to the class that I've just made here called logo. So I'm going to go class equals logo. So basically what I'm saying is I want a box on my screen that's got the style properties of logo. Alright, so if I then write something in here, so hello world, and I save this, and I save my CSS, if I open up my web browser, or let's just go and open up the page, I've got a red box with 300 pixels in width, 75 pixels in height, and I've just written hello world in it. Okay, so that's how I would style a box. Worrying about where that's placed starts to get tricky now. The reason things start to get tricky now is because my next box, I want to be next to that box. Normally when we write stuff on HTML pages, things come one after the other. Starts at the top, whatever I write next will go underneath it, etc., etc. But what I want is I want to put something next to it. Now, before I go any further, I want to explain something. There's standard sizes for websites, okay? So what I mean by that is my screen that we're looking at right now has a certain resolution to it. So if I just go to adjust screen resolution, you can see that the width of my whole screen that I'm looking at is 1280 pixels in width by 1024 pixels in height. Now, that's cool. So if I build my website based on those dimensions, that all makes sense. So think about it. This box here is 300 pixels in width. So if I subtract 300 pixels from what the width of my screen resolution is, it means that I've got 980 pixels left to play with, i.e. this space here is 980 pixels in width. So if you think about it, what I should do is make this 980 pixels in width. But I've got a problem. The problem comes is if I went home to my house, I've got a 27-inch iMac and my screen resolution is twice as big, i.e. my screen width is 2400 and something. Yep. Another problem, if I go up to my monitor upstairs in my office, my screen resolution is smaller than this. So I shouldn't be designing specifically for one screen. What I should be doing is designing for many screens. Alright? So what you tend to do is you tend to work on the basis that the majority of screens in the world, and this is a statistic, that the majority of screens in the world have a width of 1024 pixels by 768 pixels. That's what you have to base it on. Alright, so roughly that is the majority of screens in the world have those dimensions. But then you've got to think of things like, well, okay, that's pretty cool, that 768 in height, but what about this area on a web browser? If I make this body 768 pixels in height, I haven't taken into consideration that web browsers have this section at the top. Yeah? So, what I want to do, and I haven't also taken into consideration that there might be a scroll bar on my website. So, normally what we do is we consider the fact that that's the majority of the width, but we normally build websites at maybe something like 920 pixels in width by about, and we tend to work on something like 650 in height. So imagine that that's the only space you've got to work with. 920 pixels in width, 650 pixels in height. Alright? So, based on that, watch what I'm about to do. I'm about to go and create a new container above this one, so a new class. I'm going to call this class container. You'll see what it does in a minute. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set its width to what we've just worked out. I'm going to set its width to 920 pixels. Alright? Not going to worry about the height at the minute, but I am going to give it a background color just so you can contextualize what this looks like. So I'm going to give it a background color of, let's go for green. Oops. Okay, of green. Save it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to encase everything. So it's as if I'm going to do this. Imagine this is the container. I'm going to put everything inside a container that is 920 pixels in width. Alright, so let me do that. I'm going to encase this. I'm going to create another div, which is just another box. I'm going to give it a class of container, like that, and then I'm going to encase all of this inside that container. Notice that these indents help quite a lot. Now, here's what we've got. Save that. Save that. You'll notice that this looks really weird. That looks really weird. Yeah, but that red box is inside that green box. Now, that looks stupid. That looks stupid because it will look brilliant on most web browsers, because most web browsers are that big. But it looks stupid on a web browser that's this big. And it'd look even more stupid on a web browser that's even bigger. Apart from, what about if I put this bang in the middle? Then it wouldn't look as silly. So to do that, I'm going to give this a property of margin auto. And watch what this does. This now puts that bang in the middle. And when I say bang in the middle, I mean no matter how big your web browser is, that is bang in the middle. So I go home to my 27-inch monitor, that's still in the middle of my 27-inch monitor. I go upstairs to my smaller screen monitor, that's still in the middle of my smaller screen's monitor. I put it on this one, it's absolutely fine. But now I'm constraining myself so that everything is 920 pixels in width. But that's a good thing. That's a good thing because now I know exactly how big each of these things should be. If I have 920 pixels to play around with, then I play around with 920 pixels. So if I've just given this, I think I've just given this 300 pixels, that would mean that I've got 620 pixels to put this menu in. 620. So now I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to create a class called menu. I'm going to give it a width of 620 pixels. I'm going to give it a background color. I'm just going to copy a few of these things. I'm going to give it a background color of blue, 0000 FF. I've still got a little tricky thing. Watch this. This is still a little bit tricky. Because now, what I'm going to do is go into index.html. I'm going to put that new div, I'm just going to copy this one, and put that new div below it. So I've got my div logo, and then I'm going to have my div menu. Inside this one, I'll write the word menu so you can distinguish between them. But notice that both of these divs are still inside the container. They are inside here, so they sit inside that container. If I save this, you'll still see that there's a problem. When I hit refresh, my blue one's gone below my red one. Yep, my blue box has gone below my red box. So all I need to do is in each of these classes, I'm just going to write the word float left. You'll see what this does in just a minute. Basically, this says each of these divs float to the left of each other. So this one will float to the left of this, and this one will float to the left of this. So save, hit refresh, and now they're floating right next to each other. So these two divs are right next to each other, and they are inside that container div. So they're always going to be in the middle.